Perfect. All right. Well, welcome everybody. We're just getting settled in, letting everybody in. Welcome to part 2 of our Culture Under Pressure webinar series, How to Lead When Your Team is Carrying Stress, Grief, or Trauma and Still Expects You to Just Focus on Production. Today we're going to be talking about saying the thing without saying the wrong thing. And these are conversation skills for high tension moments. And as we shared in some of our email communication with y'all, today is going to be a little more conversational and more collaborative with you as attendees. So hopefully you're in a position to share with us a little bit or get some help on any particular conversations or issues that you'd like to have with anyone in your team or maybe even your family for that matter. We'll open it up to that too. But we're going to go over some basic stuff just to get us started here, and we'll go from there. All right, so again, welcome. We're really excited to have you all with us, and welcome back to those of you that were with us from last session. And of course, we'd love to have you say hello and chat in where you are coming from today. So if you want to just put that in the chat, it's always really helpful when we have some chat going on at the same time. So feel free to chat away in the chat box and say hi to us. I'm coming in live, local, late breaking from Grand Rapids, Michigan. Edna, I believe you're in the DC area, and Jonathan is in Arizona these days. Is that right?
I
Yeah.
am. Last week in Scottsdale, I am ready to get out of the desert.
Yeah. Yeah. No kidding. All right. So just to recap what we chatted about last time is we talked about what's it mean to actually be a leader and how leadership is greater than your opinion. So we always want to make sure that we're actually stepping into the role of leader versus keeping our focus on what our opinions are or what we think is the right thing to say. We also went over the idea that silence is not leadership and also why it backfires on us all the time. So a lot of us as leaders sometimes think that burying our head in the sand is more effective than actually handling the conversation and speaking up and bringing attention to the matter. And then Edna did a really beautiful job of sharing with us what your teams are actually carrying and getting really present to the reality of what your team members are dealing with on a daily basis. And oftentimes it's much different than what you're dealing with on a daily basis as well. So getting really comfortable with the idea that your team members are struggling with things that you might not be aware of. And then Jonathan really helped us out and walked us through how to run a simple stabilize, sense make, and support play framework. And for those of you that were not on the last session, you should have definitely received the recording. So if you're unfamiliar with that still, we invite you to go back and watch the recording if you need to play a little bit of catch up on that. And then we also talked about delivering a 60-second safe here message to your team and patients. And so something to really think about also is what's going on in the world not only affects your team, but also affects your patients. And that's something that always really brings, was very kind of sobering for me when I thought about it too, thinking about this stuff that our patients are dealing with in the day to day. And like Edna was talking about as well, if you have patients that are very much in like a heavily Latin area, for example, they may even be afraid to come to the dentist out of fear of being turned in or reported or something like that. So really getting present to what your patients are dealing with as well. And then we also have, today we're going to be going over 3 Power Pack tools. So we're going to talk about how to start a conversation without actually stereotyping, rescuing, or freezing. We're going to talk about handling split teams that have different beliefs, different fears, without turning the office into Thanksgiving. And that's a little bit of a joke because if you ever had Thanksgiving with your family, you may recall that people have different opinions. And in most families, it's like, we do not talk about religion or politics at this table. But sometimes that still happens in teams and within companies as well. And then how to use boundaries and empathy language. So we're going to help you guys out with that and having some of those tough conversations. And just as a reminder, in case you don't know who I am, I'm Brandi. I'm your host today, and I also am the founder of Courage and Joy at Work, the empowered leadership experience for women in dental, and also the host of the Real Talk of Dental podcast. I'm a leadership coach for dentists and teams, and I also help leaders break out of burnout, people pleasing, and how to communicate effectively. And something I'm known for is blending strategy, soul, and real talk. So I like to get really honest. And I'm going to kick it over to my co-host, Edna. She can introduce herself.
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Edna. It's awesome to be here again and to see all of you guys on. So I'm the founder of the Dental Culturist and Latinas in Dentistry, which is a community group for all women that are in dentistry and are Latinas. So if you have team members, employees, anybody that you know in our industry, that is a Latina, if you could have them join, they know they don't have to speak Spanish. I got that question last time. No, you don't have to speak Spanish, just a Latina and Hispanic background. I also am the owner of Virtual Standard Solutions, which is a remote VA company. And we support our agents in Argentina, Nicaragua, and Zimbabwe. I basically love to build high performing team members. I love culture driven teams and try to make sure that each practice is indulged with their niche of what culture looks like. I honestly have a transparent voice about what's really going on inside of dentistry based on culture, and I'm a big believer in belonging and inclusivity. So, yep, here to help you guys.
Awesome. And then we also have Jonathan. Go ahead and introduce yourself, Jonathan.
Amazing. Thanks, Brandi. Thanks, Edna. It's always fun jumping on with these leading ladies. They always share some fun, quirky stories. But I am Jonathan Rocha Bonnano. I am the managing partner and an industrial organizational psychologist with our agency, Zia. We focus on talent acquisition and talent development across virtual, on-site, and hybrid teams. I'm most known for coming in for a lot of conflict resolution, and that's mainly to simplify complex emotional situations, make sure that we're actually navigating some of the challenging and sticky conversations we at times find ourselves in. I definitely believe leadership is a load-bearing function. I don't believe it just rests at the title, whether you're the janitor or the CEO. How you treat people, how you operate, how you interact with one another tells more than your title ever will. And I'm also not afraid to get real and teach you too. I don't like to sugarcoat. I don't like to perfume the pig. I am real, I am raw, and I am a no BS kind of guy. So excited to be here.
Awesome. So Edna's going to kick us off now that we had a review of what we chatted about last session on the realism check. So what actually lands and what doesn't.
Yes, thank you, Brandi. So it's definitely a topic that is true to my heart. Because I feel like if you guys were on last time, I feel like we don't say the things that really need to be said. And sometimes we actually can what you would call fluff it a lot. You can fluff some things and say, well, are you okay? If you'd like, you can come and talk to me. My door is always open. We always get that awesome line like, my door is always open if you ever want to talk. So today I want to kind of discuss on actually talking to your team and seeing them for who they actually are and what they're going through. Next slide, Brandi. So things that land versus what doesn't land. So what lands with your team members, showing up consistently, not just after a big news event, especially with the times that are happening right now. Things that pop up in the news and it triggers like, oh, maybe I should check on this person. This may have affect them, which is cool and everything, but then not forgetting about that consistent check-in. So again, checking in, showing up consistently, not just after an event, and checking in once doesn't land, then going quiet until the next crisis. So until something that triggers you to remember. So just make sure you always are consistent about remembering and seeing your team members. What does land? Asking quietly in private without making it a performance. What doesn't land? Sending a company-wide email about our diverse team with no follow-through. That's something that a lot of practices, when a lot of my teams, they've asked, what is the best way to handle this? It's okay to publicly say, hey guys, we are accepting of everyone and everything, all political views, all, everybody, religious views, all the things. But it's also important to be able to see your team members and the way they kind of react to what's actually happening, particularly some team members. You know, there are going to be some team members who are more sensitive to a particular subject than others. And then also we physically see our team members almost 7 to 8 hours a day, and you can physically see them change their emotions, whether it's the way they interact with the patients, whether it's the way that they interact with each other, or even the way that they are no longer naturally themselves. So if you notice something, definitely say something. What lands? Remembering what someone shared last time and following up. What doesn't land? Acting surprised that your staff are afraid, then afraid about your feelings. And so what I want us to remember is if a team member shares a vulnerable or has a vulnerable moment with you, a follow-up is good, right? It's like somebody, think about as if your friend, if something were to happen to your friend, or they have a moment in their lives that is critical. If you just follow up with them and say, hey, I'm so sorry that this happened to your pet. And then the next day you talk to them about Taco Tuesday, you can imagine how that feels. And it's the same thing with your team members. A lot of team members also don't share how they feel because they're nervous about not how you'll react to it, you know, what your immediate reaction is going to be. We last time we spoke about team members or leads or even business owners identifying certain team members as being too sensitive. Oh, that's the sensitive person. That's the apolitical. That's the religious person. And team members see that, and they are able to kind of get a whiff of being judged. What lands? Saying, I don't have all the answers, but I see you, and meaning it. That definitely lands with team members. And then I love the compliment that we always give, that we feel like we're doing an extra step. Just stay positive. Said to somebody that's genuinely afraid. So I want to spend some time on this because we talked about saying the right thing or not saying anything at all. Not saying anything at all puts you in a gray space. It puts you in a position where your team members are now going to make up their own idea of what you're feeling rather than you vocalizing and saying, hey, I see how things are going for you. I can see the difference between yesterday and today because of this particular event. How are you feeling? Versus us just looking at somebody and saying, oh, they're having a rough day. Or some people also say, it looks like you're having a rough day today, but tomorrow will be better. You're not really addressing the root problem here. You know, you're just bypassing it. So the difference between landing and not landing is honestly consistency with no hidden agenda. Next slide.
Edna, I want to jump in here too because I really like what you're talking about there about not having the answers. And a lot of times leaders think they have to spin everything to be positive because they want to keep like morale up, have everybody feel better. And I see Steve Craig on here, so shout out Steve, one of the few men that are on here as learning. And Dr. Corey, I see you too. Hopefully you're listening. But in a predominantly female industry at this point, which is pretty rad, a lot of times women just want to be seen and like just acknowledged and heard. So even if you don't have the answers, and also just women to women, but just saying, man, that sounds really hard.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's just being with them in the moment and acknowledging that the situation they're experiencing really sucks and not having the answer. Or, you know, like I know you were saying, a lot of times people say, well, tomorrow's a new day, or look at the bright side. You know, your partner may have just left you of 20 years, but hey, you know, there's a lot of fish in the sea, you know, by trying to say something like spin it in this really positive way bypasses the emotional weight of what that person is experiencing. And just, you can simply say like, man, that sounds really hard.
Yeah.
And just pause. You
Yeah.
know, you don't necessarily need to fill it with the solution. And as a leader, like then, like you're saying, another person sees, you feel seen in that moment. And then they can say, yeah, it is really hard.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I feel like
you
something
know?
that also lands with team members. I was a team member for a really long time also. Just being seen, like
Yeah.
just being seen and being acknowledged that something is wrong, is enough. Sometimes that's just enough. And just saying, I can tell you're not the same, Brandy,
Mhm.
and or something is going on with you today, and I'm just here. I want to listen if you want to share. I want to create that space for you. And then just that's it, and just allow them to say, hey, X, Y, and Z. And like I said, you could always use this line. I honestly don't have all the answers, but I see you and I hear you.
Hmm. Yeah, perfect.
Next slide, please.
Yeah.
Thank you. Perfect. So what's happening outside in our own worlds definitely comes to work with us. Guys, there is no on and off button, right? Right when I step in and clock out, I don't magically transform into this non-emotional creature that only cares about ADA codes and P&Ls. Like that doesn't happen, right? We don't have we're not made out of dental robots. Like that's not how our mind is made. We're humans. So is your team members. They're also human. So um, low performance equals something is wrong, right? Especially I use this example a lot because I coached treatment plan coordinators, and we teach on charisma, character, emotional connection with the patient in order to get something closed, in order to connect with the patient and allow them to give them the trust for them to say yes to you. But if I am in that position and my my uncle just got deported last night from ICE, I cannot be that person today for you. No matter how hard I try, it's not going to happen. Naturally, as humans, we're not made up to be able to kind of unplug and disconnect as much as we want to. So as much as we say you have to leave the work, the personal stuff outside and not bring it into work, that is a tall tale that's never going to happen. It's never occurred. It's something that we say that makes it sounds good, but it's not ever going to happen. It's not reality. And so this is our reality currently that we're living. Families are currently making contingency plans they never expected or needed. Um, you're going from a two household income, and this can be apart from ICE, this can be a divorce, a separation, a death. People are making unexpected plans for things that they never saw coming, and they don't share that publicly, but they're going through it. Staff watching the news between patients and hiding how scared they are. How about your phones, right? Like now we have our phones and your watches, and all people see is the CNN notification pop up on your phone, and all you can think is, now what? Now what is happening? Or now we have Amber Alerts going crazy all over our areas. And school shootings, we're thinking about all that stuff. That anxiety is true. If you feel it as a business owner or as a leader or as a doctor or a dentist, your team members feel the same exact thing. There's no difference in feeling that way. Children asking questions that parents don't have the answers to. A lot of us on teams that are actually in the workplace are parents. And with school shootings happening, or even kids talk in school, they talk all the time. You're no longer looking at police officers the same way as you did before. Now you're wondering if they're going to grab one of your friends, from the playground or something and take them. Like that's all kids ask. On a personal story, my kids ask me the same thing. My children are born here, they're US citizens, and they asked me. They had a question and they said, "What is a US citizen? Like what is that?" And never in my wildest dreams did I feel like I ever had to explain that to my kids. They would understand as they got older. I had to fill out applications, but never at 13 and 10 years old. And it was my daughter who was 10 that asked me. She's like, "What's a US citizen? Like, what does that mean? Are we US citizens?" Because kids only see happy things. They're not supposed to have these explanations and these conversations with adults. And now as parents, we're coming into workplaces saying, heck, like how am I supposed to answer this in a way that is not going to discourage them emotionally or scare them. So team members are also going through that. And you yourself, as a business owner or a dentist entrepreneur, may also be feeling that same. The drive to work feeling different than it used to. I can totally raise my hand and say that. I shared last time, it feels different. The climate itself feels different. There's seasons that in our country that we've gone through with certain things that have happened. Like we had the 9/11 thing that happened, and a certain group of people were targeted during that time. We had a VCU school shooting where a certain group was targeted that way. We had COVID, a certain group was targeted. And so it just happens. It's our reality that we live in. And so we feel that pressure or that dark cloud over us when we hear about it. That's a natural emotion. Community networks carrying information that leaders may never see. And that's important. So I do want to encourage everybody that's on here to tap into some of these community groups that are supportive or supporting of some of the political things or emotional things that are happening to our like amazing resources out here. I know Jonathan's awesome at this stuff. Tap in with experts that can lead and guide you on how to navigate through what your team members are seeing so that they can show up like their regular selves or at least as close to and deliver the experience that you want them to deliver to your patients and to your business and to you. This is the air that your team members are breathing, and you're actually in it too. Whether we want to talk about it or not, it's honestly our reality. Next slide, Brandi.
Mhm.
So I will pass it over to Jonathan. So thank you guys for that space and allowing me to be vulnerable with you guys.
Thanks, Edna.
Of course.
Thanks so much, Edna. That was really great, really powerful and really purposeful content as well. I think we find ourselves lost at so much of the external stress and then the internal stress of going to work. And then we're trying to figure out where we're supposed to place that experience. And then it kind of just boils up and boils over. So this is always a fun, I would say, next transition or stage as we go from the conversation of containment to how do we actually operate within what's been contained. So today I'm going to teach you how to, from the shoulders is how we're going to go at this. No, I'm just kidding. We are going to be really looking at what are some of the interpersonal risks that end up rising as a result of authority and public tension really showing up in these spaces. And whether or not that level of authority is actually amplifying or destabilizing the amount of risk that is showing up inside of these conversations, inside of these constructs too. So excited to jump in and share a little bit more. So one of the big things that if you follow me or follow any of my content, you know that psychological safety is one of the foundational and fundamental elements that I speak from, I operate from, I always voice and talk about. And what commonly is misunderstood is that psychological safety is thought as this fluffy thing too, as Edna mentioned. It's fluffy, it's soft, it's safe, it is performative, it is nobody has a disagreement, everyone loves each other and kumbaya. And that's not what it's about. Yes, that side of it does exist, 100% absolutely, but intentional work must be taken in order for that to be the output and outcome of what you experience inside of your culture, inside of that dynamic. But psychological safety is all about healthy risk-taking. It's about knowing that there's going to be a form of discomfort present, but more so leaning into the fact that you're being safe to be vulnerable, you're being safe to share, you're being safe to challenge the status quo that many of us have either inherited inside of an existing business model or existing team dynamics, which doesn't really allow for a lot of room to be creative or go against the grain. So in the space of psychological safety, we want to ensure that you're creating a space that's safe to ask, admit, disagree, and disclose information of all regards. It's not required for everyone to be agreeable even, yes men, yes women, eliminating tension immediately, or avoiding any standards of practice that are up to your personal standards. Safety will only exist inside of the hierarchy that's created. And if you recall from our last conversation, I mentioned the comment and remark around, the fish stinks from the head. So it's always kind of, you go for the leader, you see where it's kind of trickling down inside of that experience. And while that is absolutely true in a traditional hierarchy, one of the common models that I like to operate from is a holacracy model, which is a bilateral feed of communication. Whether you're the CEO or the janitor, customer service representative, treatment coordinator, dentist, what have you, whatever role that you're holding, the opportunity is for safety to exist inside of every single chamber of that ecosystem. No matter the role, no matter the title, no matter the experience that you bring forward or the experience that you're beginning to cultivate and create. If someone cannot admit fear, confusion, or concern because their identity feels attacked or it's going to be too vulnerable for them to show up and show out, their performance is going to suffer. Their productivity is going to suffer over time as well. One of the stats that I looked at the beginning of the year when, workplace statistics, staffing industry analytics come out, I'm a big sci-fi nerd, so I look at, or not sci-fi, but science nerd, so I look into all of that stuff. And one of the most common things that shows up at the beginning of the year is divorces and dissolutions of marriages and relationships. And I was baffled to recognize and understand that somebody that's going through that stage in their life, that impacts productivity, not just for the month or the moment that it starts to happen. The data is showing it's starting at 9 months and up. So who knows what's actually going on inside of the interpersonal makeup of that individual, on top of how that's coming to work, on top of the safety of the team dynamic to even share that information, on top of whatever else that person is dealing with inside of their key objectives or key role. And that is kind of scary. So in that kind of aspect where it is a negative experience, going and even piggybacking off of what Edna has shared, there's a lot of stress that begins to build. There's a lot of tension that begins to build. So we always are questioning whether or not, again, are we putting ourselves in that survival mode to where we have to react and respond to these things almost instantaneously? Or do we need to give us an opportunity to take a step back, really reflect and understand what is going on, what's in our space, what are we really trying to solve for? And that's where we can really understand whether or not safety is truly present. And it's not just, again, about safety equaling comfort. It's safety just having a one-on-one conversation. It's safety inside of I can come to work and know that I'm going to be able to get my job done, no matter the emotional condition or stability or state that I'm in today. But again, comfort's not the goal. Stability is.
Yeah, I want to jump in here too, Jonathan, because in one of our earlier conversations, I think last year, something you shared that was such a huge aha for me that I see a lot, and I think those listening would benefit too. A lot of times you'll hear, from leaders like, man, I want A game team members. Where are all my A game team members? And you might have a handful that are quote unquote A game, and then they complain that they have a bunch of C and B gamers, right? And they want people to take risk and go all out. But a lot of times I'll see those that are asking for these A gamers tend to have this, they lack psychological safety. Like they can be explosive, they can have tempers, they're not as emotionally mature or wise as they think they are. And so what that ends up creating in the offices and in the companies is a bunch of people playing safe. And so they're not going to take these big risks and go all out because there's fear there that if they swing for the fence and they miss, there's going to be some sort of repercussion or there's going to be attention on them, and then that might be negative attention. So everyone just plays safe, and what a lot of leaders call C gamers really are people that are just playing safe. And so if you spin it that way and ask yourself, why don't I have all these A gamers? Well, maybe it's not a safe environment. Let's start there. If you have more people that are playing in the middle of the pack versus just a couple outliers, I would now guess that the office or the company or the culture that you've created isn't safe. And what does that mean, right? And again, it's not, and this doc that I worked with, never in a million years would he think he was psychologically unsafe because he never attacked team members directly. He himself was a hothead just in life. He would get really mad at the news. He was just a very passionate person
Yeah.
about stuff. And he was always grumbling under his breath. And, he expected perfection and he was his own worst critic. And he kind of just had this attitude. I mean, quite honestly, he was one of my favorite people. I mean, I love the guy. I thought he was kind of hilarious, but
Yeah.
I didn't like how he was with his team. And then also, he never looked up when people came into his office. So that was something
Mm.
that I was trying to work with him on. He too, like Edna said, like, oh, I have an open door policy. Anyone can come talk to me at any
Until you
time.
knock on the
I
door.
love questions.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
And then they walk in and his
Feel it.
face is still, he never would look up from his phone or computer.
Mhm.
Wow.
And I
Mhm.
would say, for the love of God, can you please make eye contact and
Yeah.
acknowledge their existence,
Yeah.
right? But he would never dawn on him that he was not creating a safe environment.
Yeah.
And then in that same office, an assistant was taking a lot of time off, and the office manager they were all thinking, oh my God, why is she taking all this time off? She's slacking. She doesn't care about the office anymore. I had gone out for a visit and I said, she's an incredible team member. Has anybody asked her what's going on?
Mm.
And then they finally
Mhm.
did, and turns out her mom had been diagnosed with cancer, and
Oh,
she was taking time off to help her with appointments and things like that. But she was too afraid to say anything
Mhm.
because she didn't want the office to be worried that she wasn't going to perform as well. So she was just eating up her PTO.
Yeah.
Right.
mm.
So again, she didn't feel safe enough to speak up, and the office went into being accusatory first before checking in and saying, "Hey, is everything okay?" Like Edna, you were saying too. Like, "Hey, you've always been consistent. Why now? Like, what's going on?" Right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
agreed. I think I would challenge, and this is something for everyone who has said this, I have an open door policy. You can always talk to me. I would encourage some you guys to write that sentence down and then beside it, write what you actually mean when you say that.
Mm-hmm.
What
Mm-hmm.
does
Yeah.
that actually mean? If I say that, what do I really mean? Does it mean, yes, they can really come talk to me, or is it I really don't want to hear too much, just enough? Or am I saying that to make myself feel better or feel good about it? So that's definitely a challenge for you guys to just write it down and really get the real meaning behind that sentence that we all love to say.
Yeah, or your open door policy. I mean, if you're somebody that's working with people in the physical space and not all remote, and your open door policy is just that you literally leave your door open so
Mhm.
everyone can hear
Right,
you yelling at someone
right,
on the phone. Like that
right,
doesn't,
right.
you
Yeah,
know, and you don't look up when they, come into the room. So yeah,
yeah,
what does it actually
Yeah.
mean?
yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jonathan.
Yeah. Well, that was a perfect segue into identity-based stress increases silence, because it's so true, right? I mean, I can definitely attest to being at the effect of the ego of my leader and whatever mood that they were in that day and whatever directions or lack thereof I received. And it's really sad. It's really destructive. They think they're being constructive and that laissez-faire style of leadership starts showing up, but really it's just, no, they're just being a little lazy. And then that really impacts your overall experience, your overall productivity, all the things that drive the revenue, drive the outcomes, drive the support systems. But the biggest thing that ends up showing up when we start looking at identity-based stress itself is that avoidance will feel neutral to that leader, but it's always going to feel unsafe to the team. They're going to feel as though that they've done enough, they've communicated enough, they shared everything, they told you what to do, you should figure it out by now, X, Y, and Z. That is never fully heard or understood when we're constantly communicating from the chamber that we respond to. And I think that's always the gentle reminder for ourselves that communication is never about the sender. It's always about the receiver. So how are you showing up? How are you behaving? How are you communicating? What are your manners? What is the language that you're using to create visuals or illustrations of what you're trying to bring to life? But when we really start looking at the aspect of how the silence begins to increase, it really begins to come from a space of vulnerability. Again, are you vulnerable and willing and open to share openly? Are you willing to have those conversations that, again, go against the grain, that will make people uncomfortable, that aren't always the most savvy or beautifully or eloquently designed conversations? They don't have to be. You just have to be willing and capable of holding the space for them. But one thing that constantly shows up is when somebody is in this vulnerable state, they start going into the stage of self-monitoring, reducing their own visibility, meaning they're not involved, they're not engaged, they're not showing up on time. They start avoiding dissent. They don't want to be a part of conversations. They don't want to be a part of contributions. Whatever you say, I'm going to go with it because you're the boss. And whatever you say anyways, we go with it. And then we start seeing suppression of concerns. Again, silence is compliance. So those that aren't sharing anything, aren't speaking up, don't necessarily mean that they're in agreement to what's being said or discussed. They're just following the natural path and patterns that have shown up within the place of work. So when somebody is in that space, they find, I wouldn't say finally or commonly find themselves in these spaces, but some of the most common conversations when we go into our like self-talk and self-dialogue, you just start asking yourself is, how am I being perceived? I've always been the youngest in the room. I've always been the young guy on the team. My first leadership position was at the age of 20. So coming in, I was young, I was hungry, I was ready to work, I was ready to start doing things. But that's not always well received from, the 10-year team members, the senior people that have put in their time, but not necessarily have challenged the status quo as somebody that's coming in young and hungry that wants to see change because they want to experience change. But that, again, doesn't always entice that level of safety. It can end up creating further frustration, further tensions amongst other team members. I've been on teams as well where, I've had team members, a part of myself or a part of my peer, if you will, where they were more vocal. They were willing to stand out. And those that were more timid and reserved were just willing to go with the level of flow, but it also had a different impact because of the stage of different careers and different career timelines. Somebody coming into a leadership position that's in their emerging state as opposed to somebody that has been there, they find themselves more sedentary. They're not really looking to move. They're not looking to grow. They're not looking really to develop. They're looking to come do their job and do it well. And that is great, but it can also be destructive when you're having those types of mixed dynamics coming forward and expecting people to contribute without that level of safety being present either. But this is all coming from, our working memory, our working capabilities. And if we use silence as our own form of self-protection, it doesn't allow for any form of clinical evaluation to really show up inside of our discussions. It doesn't allow for us to really dig deeper into the behavioral impacts that need to be changed, which ultimately is critical to whether or not the leader is effectively performing and actively performing inside of the directives that they've been given. So it's definitely interesting when we really start looking at the silence parameters, because this ends up showing up almost instantaneously in the way that we start showing up as leaders in conversations very, very early on. Brandi, you can go to the next slide, please. And this is where authority without calibration really starts to show up. And when I say this, it's not to say that if you're uncalibrated, you're not a bad leader, you're not a malicious leader. It just shows that you're not regulated inside of some of the conversations that you should or could be having within your team dynamic. When you're operating as an uncalibrated or dysregulated individual, your avoidance meter is turned all the way up. You find yourself over controlling or micromanaging outputs. There's a level of inconsistent enforcement. That's where you start seeing the levels of favoritism showing up. Like, oh, he'll be able to knock this out in 2 hours. I'm not going to give him a due date. But this one over here, she needs to get it done in 20 minutes, right? Like, that's not fair. It creates that level of divisiveness inside of a team. You also see perceived bias, which is that favoritism that also ends up beginning to show up. And typically under stress, we either, if we're an authoritative figure, we often withdraw or we begin overcorrecting. And that's our opportunity to understand, where is that interpersonal risk of withdrawing for the right reasons and overcorrecting for the right reasons too. Because we want to make sure that that level of safety is still present, whether you are calibrated or in the process of being calibrated inside of your leadership style and conversations. Back in my early corporate careers, I used to work in bio-life sciences, pharmaceuticals. I was a part of a large implementation for a schizophrenic product that went to the market back in early 2015, 2016-ish. And part of this was a brand new team of leaders coming in. I was one of them. And my leader, unfortunately, was going through a divorce. It was a really big, sticky mess. Husband was sleeping with the babysitter, the whole thing, it was like a big nightmare. Well, as you can imagine, corporate America, they tell you, no, deal with that outside. Well, that didn't get left outside. That was sprayed and prayed all over our entire team dynamic. And this was the individual that unfortunately didn't earn her role as the manager. She inherited the role as a manager due to tenure and time. She was with the company for almost 10 years. They thought, okay, great, 10-year gifts, we're going to make you the manager now. When you're put in those positions where you're really great and effective at doing one single function of a job, and then now you become responsible for the jobs of people, there's a really big learning curve that ends up taking place. And when you're not operating as a calibrated leader or calibrated human, you become very reactive. You become very emotional to conversations that might sound as fear or attacking or judgment. And there was an instance where I actually challenged my leader. Go figure. But I challenged my leader in the sense that we had brought on a new supervisor to the team. She was actually going through training by one of my peers. I was overhearing and listening to the training that was being given. It was wrong information. I heard my supervisor, my manager at the time, come over and regurgitate that same incorrect information. Me being me, I'm not going to sit around and just let false information go by. You know, I'm part of the escalation team, part of the help queue. We had over 700 team members. We had to be responsible for the information that we were sharing. So when I look back at it now, I look at it and like, yeah, maybe I could have been a little gentler. I didn't need to be as abrupt, but I inserted myself in the conversation and shared, hey, like you guys are giving 3-month-old information to the team right now. And working with this product that we were on, we were dealing with A1C levels, we were dealing with pharmacists, we were dealing with the providing physicians on this product, and we couldn't speak to patients directly. They're schizophrenic. So we needed to make sure that we were collecting adequate and appropriate information in this program. She did not like that I told her and told them that incorrect information was being given. She gets up from her desk, storms out. I don't see her for 2 hours. And then I get the dreaded email that I knew that I was going to receive, but I didn't think I was going to get it the way that I got it. So got the meeting invite to go workshop inside of a huddle room, took my happy butt and walked in there with my laptop, and I sat down. And that's where I got reamed. And I got reamed from the sake of, you challenged me, you should have brought me into a private room to correct me. You should have, 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 you should have. And I sat there, I listened, of course. I'm still young, still trying to grow, still looking at career advancement opportunities. I looked at her and I literally said straight to her face, I'm like, I'm not going to sit by and watch my team receive incorrect information that's going to put us up on the line of being either yelled at or screamed at by a doctor, yelled at or screamed at by a pharmacist, deal with a caregiver. I'm like, that's not fair for us to be not privy to the information that is present. And I said, this is a reflection of your leadership by not being involved and not being engaged in the team dynamics that we're having on a daily basis. If we were onboarding a new team member, we should have been more prepared, meaning you should have been more prepared to inform them. And her response was, if this conversation was happening differently, meaning off hours, you could find me outside. So I said to her, I'm like, okay, what am I supposed to do with that? Am I supposed to fight you outside on the block because you provided incorrect information? No, not going to do this. So I removed myself from the meeting and I got HR involved, and then it became a bigger thing than it needed to be. But when you find yourself working within those parameters, you have a young, hungry team member, a young emerging leader coming into your group, and maybe you're just a zesty established leader and you have a way of doing things and you have your norms and your standards. Safety is the opportunity, psychological safety is the opportunity to bridge those gaps, understand the different perspectives, and find a common ground to see how we can either implement parking lot some things or find a new creative way to make sure both voices are being heard and seen inside of those conversations. Otherwise, it just becomes a complete meltdown of interactions, meltdown of leadership tactics, meltdowns of willingness to engage as well. It's not fun. We don't come to work to fight and argue with people, let alone the customers and patients we're serving. We come to get a job done. We come because we have passion and conviction for the work that we're doing. So if we remind ourselves that that's why we're doing the work that we do, and we create safety around those and create guardrails around that, we can keep moving more effectively, more proactively as well. And that's where we start really looking at calibrating these authoritative moments, I would say, when these issues or challenges start showing up. If you identify that stress is increasing your cognitive load, or the silence is being increased because of the levels of ambiguity that are just floating around your practice all day, then your authority must be calibrated. You have to evaluate which areas are going to be the most impactful, and the most impactful areas are these four. Signal stability, reinforce your standards, and regulate your tone. You don't need to come out with all this vivacious energy. There's always a time and place for that. You want, again, communication is about the receiver, not always the sender. So what tone is going to allow that level of regulation to be felt and present, not only with you, but your team as well. Invite voice privately first. If you have a lot of introverts on your team, if they're quiet, they're timid, they don't know what to do, they're at the effects of some of the stories and some of the conversations that we've had today, have those one-on-one discussions. I always love to distinguish the difference between a check-in and a check-on. Check-in is with the person, check-on is the status on the product or project or things that are moving. So take a moment to check in and see where the opportunity is to entice further engagement and involvement. Also, audit the level of fairness. Enforcement must be consistent across identities. So again, no matter the role that you're in, you want to be able to uphold those standards. Psychological safety is only going to become a standard of practice when it's prioritized as a standard of practice. And it's not just by one person, it starts with one, but it's really felt and really experienced when everyone is fully engaged and is willing to entice that level of conversation. Also be willing to close the loop. Clarify expectations. Make sure you are doing follow-throughs, as Edna mentioned. It's one thing to have the first level of the conversation, but the proof is in the follow-up. You want to make sure that you're pulling that forward. You're finding ways to engage, finding ways to have those discussions, because that's what's going to really set the tone for how you actually show up as an authoritative figure in your practice, your business, your team, what have you. But authoritative leadership or authority, it feels and sounds like kind of like a dictator, but that has its own style of leadership. Authority in itself is meant to be clear. It's meant to be calm. It's meant to be consistent. It's meant to bring that level of stabilization, not just for psychological safety, but for your team. If you were to change the thermostat every single day, how hot or how cold are you making it? How are you finding the ways to stabilize that environment, that the level of change that might be necessary to those climates based on the interactions you're having? If you're not having conversations, if you're not checking in or checking on, you don't know where to stabilize, and let alone you don't know what to stabilize. And I think that's where we find ourselves in kind of like that biased thought process of like, I think Brandi or Edna mentioned it earlier, like, oh, they can't talk about me. It could never be about me. I know I'm doing a great job. Everyone has an opportunity to grow. That's the beauty of being leaders, is leaders are always growing because our team is always growing. We always are dealing with different personalities, different tactics, different experiences to continue cultivating our style of leadership as these nuances show up in the way that we work. One of my favorite tools is the authority calibration framework that you see here. So I invite leaders. You can either do it one-on-one, you can do it independently. I would also bring it to your team huddles, team dynamics. Entice the conversation. If psychological safety is a point of interest for you, start talking. That's a great way to start bringing this into the conversation, is having it. And identify just one thing. You don't need to identify 17 different things. Identify just one and start there and see how quickly and how effectively you can start moving that needle forward, even if it's just a single notch each time. But take it one at a time. One current tension, one vulnerable identity dynamic that you might be experiencing externally, one authority behavior that needs to be adjusted. It could be the way that feedback is being given, as Brandi alluded to earlier. It could be the way that the style is being conversed, as Edna has mentioned too. And then have one structured check-in to initiate. Create the follow-up system. Create the level of cadence for the conversations that you're interested in having. Otherwise, you're going to be at the effect of whatever external risks are going on, and that's going to hold more influence than you will as a leader. I think that was the last slide, Brandi.
Yeah. Awesome. Woohoo. Yeah, and I love everything you're saying to Jonathan in recognizing what I call like being in that charged emotional state. So as leaders, really recognizing, hey, I'm really worked up in this moment. I need to get regulated. I need to get centered before I have a response to this. And that takes a whole lot of self-awareness. And then also thinking about your story. Um, if you're a leader and you recognize another leader behaving that way, don't be afraid to speak up and hold the other leaders accountable as well. Because I know in some organizations, was with an organization the other day and they have several leaders, and one of them is a tyrant, and the others just accept, well, he's the one that has the attitude. Right. But it totally rocks the entire culture of that organization, and they just accept it for what it is versus putting him on the court and saying, hey, this isn't what we stand for. So really holding each other accountable as well as leaders, I think is really important. All right, y'all, we're gonna be opening this up. So we want to get on the court, real life scenarios. Is anyone coming in hot with something they want some coaching on, a tough conversation or a situation that they'd like to unpack with us? If you're not able to talk, you can certainly type it in the chat and we will address it. We got any courageous souls out there that have something they want to bring to us? We need that Jeopardy music.
I don't even know how it goes. I think
I think you're too. I was gonna say you might be too young to appreciate Jeopardy, Jonathan.
Hey there, this is Dawn. Can you
Hi,
hear
Miss
me?
Dawn. Yes,
Hi.
I
Dawn.
This has been just so helpful. I have a team right now who is uh, they have just really quickly, they have to take call, and they have to take call all the time. There's no break. They have to give each other breaks. And this came down from the top, and I'm powerless, and they are really struggling. And I really loved what you said about, just really listening to them. I can't change it, but I acknowledge what they're going through, and we're trying to find a better way. And I'm really excited because Brandi is going to speak to my team at the end of April. And some of this stuff is just resonates so much with what's going on. So I appreciate the time. And it was a great ride home. I just made it home. So thank you for everybody's share.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Awesome.
Dawn.
Thanks,
I'm glad you're
Dawn.
here. Yeah.
Yeah, it's always funny dealing or hearing some of those experiences, because something I always tell my team is, make sure we're not designing it based off of our purview, because we're not interacting at the level that they are interacting. So how do we create hurdles at times? And it's always an important reminder. I remind myself often that I have to not think from my lens and perspective, especially when it's going to be impacting somebody else's job function. So that way it's easier for them. I may have opinions and beliefs about the way something gets done, but there's a saying in my company where we talk about, we're flexible in process, firm and flexible in process, firm and procedure. As long as we're getting the desired outcome, how you get there isn't always defined. But systemize as much as you can.
Yeah, for sure. Erica, I saw you turned your camera on. Was that a first step in maybe unmuting yourself? Oh, she just wants to say hi. Okay.
Well, hi, this is Ashley. I
Oh,
spoke
Ashley's
to,
talking. Okay, sorry. Hi, Ashley.
sorry, was Erica about to talk?
I think her mic isn't working, but I think she was just saying hi anyway. Yeah, but go ahead, Ashley.
Well, I just spoke to Brandi the other day. She was able to grace us here in North Carolina. And kind of like started on the conversation, like we were having an issue with the employee coming to work on time. And so we had an initial conversation today. And we've had multiple conversations with her. And it's just a very difficult avenue. Because really each time we have a conversation with her, it's normally like kid related because she does have a lot of kids. And ultimately, like she's coming down to, well, this may not be a fit for her, but trying to be flexible and sensitive, but also to like there is a certain expectation, and definitely puts a lot of stress on the team when she's not able to be at work on time.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Edna, do you want to I'm guessing you run into this a bit, and then Edna, this is your story, which I'll share, but I know you're comfortable sharing. Edna is a single mom
Yeah.
and was hustling a lot earlier. She's always a hustler, actually. Edna's always working her tail off, but you were working really hard earlier in your career as a single mom, and a big part of one of the reasons you specialize in culture is just often people being afraid to even hire, single moms and things like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, do you want to speak to the idea of having a tough conversation with team members that are late and sometimes due to childcare? Because that is super common, actually.
Yeah.
And that's a
Yeah.
very delicate conversation
Yeah.
around that.
I mean, I think that there's a time to put on your office manager hat, and then there's a time to put on your like, let me help you figure this out time, and like really coming from a human perspective. So what helps a lot is when you talk to team members like some like not I hate saying the word friend, but somebody that you can relate to. I would honestly start by asking, so run me through your morning. Let's see where the gap and the roadblock is that continuously makes you late. Run me through your morning. What time do you get up? And this is a coaching moment for you as a leader or an office manager to kind of get down to what the real issue is. Is it the time that they're waking up? So I would just run through it. Okay, tell me, sit down, let's talk about what time do you get up in the morning? Tell me about your routine. What routine do you have to get your kids ready and prepared? You'll start finding things out where they'll be like, well, I have to pack their lunches. Well, why don't you pack their lunches in the evening? Maybe that could help. Or we always have, I get them ready. Well, do you put their outfits on the bed? Like strategize with them. See, what we tend to forget is we know how to strategize and how to fill schedules and recare patients and how to boost production and numbers because we strategically think about the things that we have that we forget we can utilize the same type of thing with our team members and like really systemize their evening and their lives, help them out because there may not be people that on their side that can lend them a helping hand to help them look through that lens. So I would really just run through their day and say, okay, well, why don't you lay their outfits out? What route do you take to work? Let's try to find another route that you could take. Could you wake up earlier? Start putting out a bunch of ideas out there and then let the team member, as a team member, they recognize that you actually want to keep them and that you care because now you're trying to strategize with them. You're not just like, well, everybody has kids in this office and they can make it on time. We hear that a lot, right? And they're here on time. Strategize with them. Just ask them and say, well, why don't we start this new routine tomorrow? And the next day, I'll hold you accountable and let's see how it goes. And then there's a will and a way. If the team member really wants to stay there, they will find a way and they'll be willing to change their habits or their routine. If they don't want to be there, they won't change anything at all. And you didn't waste time, you coached them. But as long as you could, go to sleep at night and say, I gave it my all, I gave her all the suggestions, all the advice, it's really on them at that point. So I would really coach them through that thought process and strategize with them and see if that works.
I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Of course.
Yeah. I was gonna say too, I think that's awesome to turn it into like a coaching moment. And one thing I would also suggest is, as you're initiating that conversation, is always ask for permission.
Mhm.
So, hey, Sarah, love having you on the team. You're a super valuable part of this team. I noticed that getting here on time is a challenge. And so are you open to sitting down with me and let's collaborate together? And are you open to some coaching so we could find a way to get you here on time so it can work out? And so you want to ask for permission because if we just start launching into giving people feedback, a lot of times it can be defensive. And then go at it like it's an experiment, right? All right, well, let's try this out for the next week. And, and I know what you said too, and I talk about this all the time. Just because you're really good at one thing doesn't mean you're good at a lot of things or everything. And so they might be crushing it, as a hygienist or an assistant or something like that, but maybe they aren't great with time management and maybe they do need help coaching that, and I kind of think I'm pretty intelligent person. And there's a lot of times where I am given very basic fundamental suggestions and I'm like, oh, yeah, I did think that. Like I overthink a lot of stuff and it changes everything. I say this all the time. I eat fistfuls of nuts and then I'm like, why don't I lose weight? And then someone goes, stop eating so many nuts. And I'm like, oh yeah, I need to eat something. All right, well, we're at time. This went really fast for me. I don't know about you guys. But this is where we're out on the interwebs. We'll email you all the good stuff on how you can get in touch with us if you're interested in scheduling any calls with us. Thank you all so much for being here. You're all incredible, and we really honor the courage that it takes to have these conversations. And come back for part 3, which is going to be April 7th at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We love you. Thanks for being so courageous, and we'll see y'all
Thanks,
soon.
guys.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.